Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee to order. We lost Rick. Where'd Rick go? I think we have one member that's on her way in, but I have Councilman Gates and Councilwoman Pastor here. And I think the hot topic is the future of transportation, the citizens' recommendation. And Rick, before we start, I've got a question to ask.
Yes.
Because I've heard a little chatter.
Yeah.
If we pass this on to the council, and if the council approves and passes this on to the voters, and if the voters approve, can we take the transit portion, turn it into an enterprise fund, take the money that's in the general fund budget for transit, and hire new police officers? Could you research that and come back, or do you have an answer?
I think I generally understand what the question is. So currently, and I think I can answer you. Currently, the Public Transit Department receives about $16 million. You will remember that from the pie chart from last time, that helps support bus and rail. And if what you're asking is, if this tax were to go on to the ballot and were to pass, could we relieve the general fund of that obligation to support bus and rail? If you wish to do that, you absolutely could. You probably couldn't direct it specifically to another source in the ballot item itself, but you could do that through some separate action that's not on the ballot.
And would that be sufficient to hire us up to, I don't know, 2 per thousand?
I couldn't answer about ratios. I think 16 million can get you in the neighborhood of 100 to 125 officers
New
over
officers.
that time period. New officers over that time period. And I don't know if Mario made it here yet, but he may know more specifically. I asked him to come to the meeting, and he'll be able to maybe address that in a little bit better way. But if you all and the full council directs that as a part of this, we would relieve, if this passes, relieve the general fund from the obligation to support bus and rail, we absolutely could make that a part of the package that goes to the voters.
It just seems like a solution to take care of not only transit, our terrible streets, but to get all the new officers that we've been trying to hire. So, Councilwoman, did you have a question?
I have a question regarding that. My question regarding that is, would it become an enterprise or would it become a special revenue fund?
Well, the transit department technically already is. The department is a special revenue fund. I think if you create it as an enterprise fund, more that specifically, you may prevent future investment in the fund by the general fund should that arise 20 years from now. And so I think leaving it a special revenue fund, but making it clear that you would relieve the general fund from the current the 16 million that supports bus and rail now, eliminates all of the general fund support for bus and rail, but doesn't preclude that 10 years from now, should there be some issue or interest in putting general fund money into the system, you could do that without taking away from what you've already committed the 16 million to.
Okay.
So we would, I just want to get this straight because this is the chatter that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that happens, will there ever be an opportunity to come back to the general fund? Because if that 16 million now has been reallocated, and say in 10, 20 years, we're at a spot, who knows where we'll be, will there ever be an opportunity to come back into the general fund or general fund funding allocated to transportation?
That would be, of course, completely up to the mayor and city council and how you direct this. But yes, you can direct it in that way. if you're planning to commit the 16 million to police officers, you probably also really want to commit that and not have to cut that money in the future. But let's say Phoenix grows like a weed and revenues are coming in great and the general fund looks good, and you see a reason to accelerate something in the transit world using some general fund dollars, you could make sure you're not prohibited from doing that in the way you craft the language of the ballot. And actually, I would probably encourage that flexibility for future councils if you were going to consider doing that. But clearly what Councilwoman Williams was asking is, right now 16 million goes to bus and rail. And what you're saying is you'd like to consider redirecting that as a part of this so that it is available for you all to commit to police. And that is clearly something that can be done. And once you do that, it's committed there unless you decide to cut police, which I don't think you would do that.
Because
So.
it appears to me the committee has done such an excellent job, that they have taken not only our immediate needs, but our future needs for transit and bus and streets. Although I think streets is just a little short, I got to tell you, in the next 30 years, and it would make us a world-class city. So I think this might be an answer. I leave that up to my fellow council members to solve 3 major problems all at once at a very low cost. So.
And Madam Chair, if you think about the total, what is expected, even over just through 2050 in terms of the increase in dollars available, what's the total number? 17 or 18 billion dollars over that time. So the annual increase is very substantial. So if you take the 16 million a year out of that, it's not a huge impact.
Well,
So what we have today for you is both for the viewing public and people here who may not have seen the last meeting. We're not going to go back over the entire excellent committee report that Chair Peters and Vice Chair Schultz and others presented, but instead just do kind of a summary version. And then we have some slides to try to address the critical questions that the committee asked last time and address some of the comments that were made by the public. So,
very good. Thank you.
if you don't mind, Maria and Ray are going to sort of go through those, and others may comment as they will.
Mr. Schultz kicking it off?
No, we're going to.
Would you let Maria? Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, you did see this chart last time, and it's always a reminder for us. When we think about what our transit system looked like before Transit 2000, we had no Sunday service at all. You needed a bus to get someplace on Sunday, forget it. We didn't have any light rail. We certainly didn't have any rapid service, which our commuters love to be able to get down to downtown. And we closed shop early on Saturdays so that if you worked late on a Saturday, you could not take transit home. You had to get a ride or some other method to get where you needed to go. So the voters took a chance on us and approved our Transit 2000 plan. Here's basically the brochure, the pamphlet that we provided based on the community's plan. And that's really what the Transit 2000 was called, was the community's plan. And so what we've seen since the Transit 2000 program has been approved is we've seen, again, 0 riders before Transit 2000, now 35,000 riders are riding on a Sunday alone. And we've seen 16 miles of light rail. And we've increased our service day so that we are running from 16 hours a day during the week and about 14 to 15 hours on the weekends. And with the mayor and council, recognition that the conversation on transit needed to continue, you all commissioned a committee to look at the transit needs and to come back to you with a comprehensive transportation plan and funding recommendations. And we did hear from that last time, but I just wanted to reiterate who all of the members, this incredible team of folks, served with us and spent lots of nights and mornings with us, and actually a Saturday, to prepare this plan. And as we mentioned before, the last one was the public's plan, and it seems fitting that this one continues to be the public's plan. So we've had numerous discussions with the community. And we've done it in a different way. So back in Transit 2000, it was a lot of night meetings and public meetings, day meetings, et cetera. And what we know is that our community continues to evolve. And so we still have the people who come to our meetings, our open houses, our neighborhood associations, our events where we can table and talk to people in person. But we know also for kids like my 20 and 17-year-old, they're never going to go to a public meeting, at least not in their current years. And they would much rather just tell me that I can go online and tell them what I think. And so our talktransportation.org really provided that opportunity to gather more comments from our community, so that instead last time it was the committee of 600 was the terminology, and I think this time we'd have to do it's the community of 3,700. Not quite as snappy as the community or the committee of 600, but certainly more people have been engaged in this process. We showed you this map last time. So these maps were developed by the committee's recognition of what important elements needed to happen in our city. Again, you have a copy at your desk that's much easier to read than what you see on this. But with this plan, we are able to provide 125 new miles of high-capacity transit. And for those of you who don't know what high-capacity transit is, it's anything that provides larger service, bigger service, faster service than a bus. So it's light rail, it's bus rapid transit, which tends to run in its own designated guideway or an own lane. It's a larger bus, it's a different feel, but it carries more people than a regular bus. And then, of course, streetcars is another one of the elements that's considered to be high-capacity transit. For our bus service, this is really listening to the community on what they'd like to see in their plan. And so what they told us was they wanted more routes. They wanted us to finish out the grid system. So in this map, you see the dark blue lines that pop out more than all of the rest of the spaghetti all over the city. But those are new lines that really address our continuing growth in Phoenix. The community also told us they want increased frequency and that they also need hours that are longer so that they can take a train and a bus to get where they need to go whenever they need to go. And I'm going to turn this over to Marty because this is the committee's recommendation. Marty?
Well, as you recall, when we made that thank you. As you recall, when we made that presentation the other day, this was the recommendation after considering all the issues that the existing T2000 tax would be increased to 0.75% or 0.75 cents, which is estimated to bring in $30.5 billion over 30 years when you consider all the resources, but the tax itself would be $17.5 billion over a 30-year period. The actual proposal before the conversation that this committee held was that the sales tax would be permanent, but not less than 30 years because the recommendation is predicated on an investment strategy of 30 years. This is really important because while we have some metrics, there is a lot that is going to occur in this community, and that formation of a combined transit streets committee to oversee expenditures and address future. And when we say innovative financing, we really do mean financing which is outside the box, which is non-traditional in this community. Frankly, not that traditional in this state, but it is being used elsewhere, and the pent-up demand for these kinds of investment strategies are pretty prevalent all over the country and the world, actually. And then we would hope that the council would be allowed the flexibility. That was a recommendation to reduce the tax based on additional revenue sources. However, I think you heard testimony from Steve Banta and others that while this recommendation has some relevance, there also needs to be a surety in your final language so that bonds can be sold.
Well, and before I go on any further, I made a big misstep, which unfortunately I do every once in a while, and I did not introduce all of their folks. You obviously know Marty, and Maria Beyer, our chairs, vice chairs of the Citizens Committee on the Future of Transportation. And we've also included Andy Federhar. And Andy played a key role. One of the things that the committee was really grappling with was the streets item. And really how to put it together. And Andy agreed to chair that subcommittee and did an incredible job. And so we wanted him at the table today, especially since Mary was traveling and not able to attend. But we also have quite a few other members from the Citizens Commission on the future of Phoenix transportation. Folks, would you mind standing up, except for, I know Phil's in the back? As I mentioned, these folks gave a significant amount of their time, and I can't say enough about how wonderful they were in providing us with input and asking a lot of really tough questions and digging into very complex information. I think as Councilman Gates said at the last meeting, this is one of the biggest things that you guys are going to be dealing with. You've had a couple of meetings. They've had about 4 to 5 months of them really digging into every little detail about transit and street transportation to help prepare this recommendation that we're presenting to you today. So at our last meeting, you asked us with questions. And so one of the things we wanted to reiterate again was the transformation of transit. You saw this slide last time, but it is still fitting that what you'll see is a tripling of our current light rail miles. And if you've got anything that happened on our existing 20 miles with the 7-to-1 return on the city's investment, all 3 cities' investment in light rail, we saw 7-to-1 return. If we even take the conservative approach here on the number of light rail miles that have been approved by council already to be built in the future, what we could see is up to a $40 billion return on the city's investment, our community's investment in light rail. We'll also see the increase in bus frequency through this plan of 70%, and span of service increased by 20%. And of course, very important to our community continues to be providing ADA and dial-a-ride service. Currently, we exceed the federal requirements for it, but we believe there needs to be more that happens with that.
Madam Chair and committee members, as Maria said, transportation played a big role in how the committee was looking at and supporting transit, but as well as how can we look at street transportation and working with the subcommittee. I don't believe we had this slide at the last meeting, but it shows that this funding, the portion that we are proposing, that the committee's proposing, is doubling the funding for overlays. That's a significant amount of money compared to what we have currently. With that, we would be looking at about close to 750 miles of arterial streets that we could get to a 30-year cycle if we have this funding moving forward, as well as other mobility enhancements, including bike lanes, sidewalks, street lights. And another component that we were looking at was major projects. How do we incorporate some of the major projects that we need to move forward in the next 30 years and incorporate that? So we have close to $280 million incorporated within that program. And some of the questions that were brought up last time regarding the overall overlay program for the streets and all of the different streets that we have close to 5,000 miles of streets. The majority of those streets are local streets. It's about 3,500 miles of streets, as well as collector streets, another 600 miles for that. So in looking at both this funding and the funding that we have right now that we collect every year, we could get our local streets and collector streets to a 50-year instead of a 65, 70-year cycle that we have right now. So it kind of leverages both this funding that is being proposed, as well as how do we leverage our current funding that we have right now overall for the arterial and the local streets is around $22 million. So both of these programs, both what we get already annually as well as this program, could bring down our our overlay cycle across all of the city. In addition, there's mobility enhancements as well as I've mentioned, and technological improvements that we need to be looking at as hardware, technology improvements that we need to do for not only for the streets that have transit, but also the ones that have transit to make sure that we're maintaining that technology aspects to it. So overall, the committee and the subcommittee knew that street transportation had a vital role in incorporating some of the elements to support street transportation and moving forward.
At the previous subcommittee meeting, there were a couple of questions that were raised at the meeting that I wanted to be sure that we addressed. So in our Phase 2 outreach, and we identified this in our City Council report on it, but really this was the second phase of after the Citizen Committee prepared their list of all of the elements. It was a nice long list. And what they wanted us to do, what they tasked staff with doing, is going out to the community and asking the community for their priorities. So that they could then make a decision based on what they had learned, what they had come up with, as well as then what the community had to say about this long list of elements. So we held 10 open houses throughout the city where we did small group discussion. We provided question and answers in those small groups. And we also provided a brochure and a survey. And the surveys, we've had more than 1,000 people return those surveys. And they've done it either in hard copy and online. So this is the survey, at least the hard copy version. So we wanted to make sure that, for those people who are still the pen and paper folks, that they had an opportunity to complete it. And I can say at the open houses, there were a lot of people who waited and filled out their survey, asking and giving us their priorities at each one of the open houses. And a lot of folks, though, took it home and then went back on to talktransportation.org and completed the survey online and submitted it. And this is also the brochure. And really, the brochure identified all of the options. And it went all the way up to a 0.85% over 10 years. So the community really had the opportunity to say which was most important to them. And we were a little bit concerned that people would come and checkbox everything or really pare it down. And from the responses we received, very thoughtful patterns on what they felt was important to them that was captured back over. And we do have the results of that survey, which we presented to the commission and again helped them prepare their recommendation, the comprehensive transportation plan. We also had a question about what were the existing transit or the high capacity transit lines currently approved in the regional transportation plan. So as you guys know, when we come forth with an alignment decision or even just a line on the map through the Transit 2000, it then has to go over and finally get into the Maricopa Association of Governments regional transportation plan. So this map is actually coordinating, looks at all of the corridors that are currently approved within the regional transportation plan and their current build dates, so their open dates. You'll see, and it's a little bit hard to see on this map, but you'll see a faint vague line down on Central Avenue South, and that is the South Central Corridor. That one is currently finalizing and going through those plans. We'll have it finalized and on the regional transportation plan. Expected date is May of this year with an expected implementation date of 2034 based on current resources, as well as an assumption that this transit tax is extended to fund the operations of that corridor.
Yes.
Will that go to the base of the mountain? I mean, it'll go to baseline? Will it go all the way to the mountain, to the preserve?
This,
Go ahead.
the study area for this also looks at extending further south of baseline as well as further east and west is part of the further study analysis on that was approved by council.
Okay.
You saw this chart last time also. So when we look at what transit brings to, and transportation, brings to the community here is a continued existing sales tax. So that's the 4/10 that I pay today when I go buy anything in Phoenix. And we're anticipating that existing sales tax will continue to bring in a $9.3 billion over a 30-year period or through 2050. And then when we look at the incremental difference, which is 3.5 cents basically, that increased sales tax brings in an additional $8.1 billion. The rest of this pot is all of the other funds that are leveraged by mostly transit, because with transit comes back in federal funds, the regional transportation program funds, as well as fares. The streets portion doesn't bring in those matching funds, but still is an important component of this. So we want to make sure that people know all of the funding sources that are part of this plan. Any questions on that?
Councilman Gates?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so that, the transit fare number that you have there, what's the recovery rate that you've assumed for the next 30 years?
So you want to address that?
Sure, Madam Chair, Councilman Gates, the fare recovery on that in general is about 25% overall based on the current regional goals.
On bus.
There's a little difference between rails, a little higher than what you see on fixed route bus.
So what's the differential? I mean, how much higher percentage recovery do you have on rail versus bus?
The current recovery on rail is about 40%. In the plan, basically we built in just an assumption of an additional 25% per dollar, assuming that all the extensions won't be quite as robust as the current initial system. So we're trying to be conservative on the fares.
Thank you.
I just want to really emphasize something on this slide. So the continuation of this sales tax generates that 9.3 billion over the 30 until 2050. The increased tax, if you adopt the committee's recommendation, generates 8.1 billion. So I think some people got confused because the total package is 30 billion or more, roughly 30 billion. That tax increase is 30 billion. The actual number of a tax increase with this plan is 8 billion. Still very large numbers, but I just want to make sure the committee's got that and the
Madam
public's
Chair.
got that very clear.
I think Rick mistakenly switched a word or two there. It's not a $30 billion tax increase.
Right.
It's a $30 billion revenue increase.
Right.
Of which this sales tax increase would account for $8.1 billion.
Another
The rest
great
is
way to-
either an existing tax base or money that comes to us as a result of the commitment of resources dedicated by the city of Phoenix.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So another question that came up at the last subcommittee meeting was, what does a continuation of the tax do? And really, what does it continue to fund? So when we looked at renewing the existing sales tax, what we would be able to fund is reduction of 15 miles of council-approved light rail. So we're not able to build all of the miles that are currently on that regional transportation plan, which have been approved by council. It would delay all of those projects by 3 to 5 years. So you saw the dates. For instance, we'll pick out the last one, South Central and Northeast Extension. Those would be another 3 to 5 years beyond those dates. It also would not, it maintains the existing bus service, but it would not deal with growth. It would not increase any frequency. It would not increase hours of operation. So it would just be continuing to operate exactly what's out there on the street today. And because it doesn't increase the service and meet all of the light rail miles, it does not meet the goals that were identified back in the Transit 2000, let alone an extension of the tax. And we would definitely see no improvement to streets with the continuation of the 410s.
Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. But just to be clear, though, it would pay for 21 miles of new light rail, right? So it's not reducing the current light rail. It's maintaining that, and it's adding another 21 miles?
Correct. So if I go back to the slide here, there are 21 miles on here minus South Central, and you'd have to identify 15 miles that go away. So we wanted to make sure that you all also had other ideas on what the sales tax as well as the other sources of funds bring in at different levels. And so what this chart shows, if you go to, and I'm really bad, so I think it's a form of dyslexia. Go to current service on the far left. This shows what it would cost to just continue to maintain the bus, dial-a-ride, and light rail that we operate today. And then we showed it at a 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 6.5/10, 7/10, and 7.5/10 to show you what the sales tax portion of that is, as well as all the other sources of funds. And final, one of the other questions that came up, and again, it's all making sure that you have as much information as possible. Councilman Gates had the question about light rail system, and it's the comparison. And so I did ask Steve Banta to see if we had any better data. And so this was another chart that they had handy that I think does a much better job of explaining how we compare, Valley Metro Rail compares to our comparison cities. But again, I need to note that you have the fiscal year 14 in the far right column, but it's compared to fiscal year 2012 data for all the other systems. This information is captured by the National Transit Database, and it's not done every year. So unfortunately, the data we have is from 2012, and that is the most current year for data that we have published.
Thank you for this chart. This is very helpful. So we look at San Diego, 56% fare recovery. What are they doing? And obviously there are some that are below ours at 40, but what are they doing in San Diego? How did they get to 56%?
Steve, I don't know if you see this.
You know, it's an interesting question. This chart was presented at RPTA, and that was one of the first questions asked. How did they do it?
Madam Chair,
Chair,
Steve Banta
Councilman Gates.
from Valley Metro Rail is here and can answer the question,
I
hopefully.
think you have to look at each one of these very differently. You have to look at the cost of their infrastructure. San Diego's initial infrastructure investment was very, very small in their overall alignment. Their cost per mile was way lower than ours. So if you look at overall operating costs plus overall fare recovery, you get that calculation. San Diego also has a very robust fare enforcement department. They've dedicated a lot of resources into providing fare inspectors and police on their system, which generates a better fare box recovery rate. That's the small answer.
Okay. Madam Chair, I mean, do we know, I mean, I assume that's something that we can look at and, you know, the extent to it, whatever it is, you know, number of officers per 1,000 riders or whatever the case may be, and compare us against San Diego.
Some of the things that we try to do is look at these transit systems as like moving cities and trying to invest in the right fare enforcement and security for the ridership that you carry. Today, clearly, we are at our 20-year projected ridership mark. We have not increased our fare inspection forces to keep pace with that ridership growth. That's one area that we need to look at. What we've also done here recently is integrated through a charter amendment with the City of Phoenix a different way in which we enforce our fares that's generating, again, a higher fare box recovery rate as it relates to what you've seen in the past. So a number of different investments and strategies we could take forward. As you know, it's a regional decision when we think about investing in fare enforcement, so it's a discussion that we have with our boards and our other member cities that fund the operation.
And just to add to that, Madam Chair and Councilman Gates, this package also has in it additional security enhancements for our system. So as the system is proposed to grow, we are also, the committee did a good job of making sure that our security infrastructure grows at least in proportion to that, so that we don't have a degradation in security as we grow the system.
Councilwoman Pastor?
Yes, and I think I heard the answer. I wanted to know how we would increase the percentage, what strategies we need to do currently, now, and as we expand to keep the percentage still up. I would like to see it at 60, but we're new and we're growing, and my concern is growth, and that we have the enforcement, we have the ability to enforce and be able to stay at a higher percentage.
First of all, we have, I always like to say, a 94% fare box recovery rate on our system instead of 6% evasion rate. but we're still not inspecting the benchmark of about 20% of our ridership. We believe, and statistics have shown nationally, the sweet spot's about 20% of your ridership being inspected for fares requires X number of fare inspectors. And once we get to 20%, we'll be to about 96, 97% fare box or a fare evasion or fare box compliance rate. And what we're trying to do is incrementally increase that each budget year with our member cities and through our budget process to provide that 20% inspection rate. We're at about 16 right now.
Councilwoman Gay?
So the last 5 times I've ridden, I've been inspected. I mean, I feel like every time I ride, and I don't know if I just, but yesterday was, as I often mention, very crowded because it was on holiday hours, and many of the people using light rail had a traditional schedule, and everyone who was on there with me had paid. So it feels like you're inspecting much more often than that, and I think it's important that we make sure everyone distinguishes that fare recovery is a different metric than the percentage of people who are paying, and just because of our cost of land and that we're building in a city that's already grown, we may not have the same fare recovery.
One of the other tactics that we're looking at moving forward is trying to evaluate where we sell our reduced fares at, and can we do them in a more controlled way than anywhere else you can buy your fares at a Circle K or a grocery store. And if we could reduce some of the opportunities for people to buy reduced fares, we increase our availability to hold people accountable to buy and purchase the right fare.
And I think that's essential. We talked about that
Thank you.
before, because we do give a lot of discounted rates for many different reasons and legitimate reasons. But yeah, I think we need better control, and that is something that is under discussion right now. So.
And Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, one of the things that also really helps with that's in this program is the next technology for, for your fares. So having a reloadable card also then would provide the opportunity to ensure that those who are buying the correct fare, and there are ways to handle that. But that is definitely something that we know needs to happen, and we've included that upgrade within this program.
One last thing I'd like to mention, though, is when you look at that chart, we're at the upper end of that chart. And if you look at us nationally to other light rail properties throughout the nation, we're at the upper end of fare box recovery.
So if we adjust it, I mean, we have, as a council and as neighboring cities, we sometimes offer fares to people because they help with other goals, or reduced fares. So could you speak a little bit to why we do this?
I do think it's an opportunity for us to reach out to folks that need us for transportation. But that also doesn't mean it shouldn't weigh down the average fare that we use to calculate our fare box recovery rate. So again, for me, I think we should support the human services that need to be supported, but do it in a way that's controlled, so when someone needs the service is available for them to utilize. And by that, I mean reducing the places in which they can buy that reduced fare media to where they got to show a picture ID and qualify themselves for that reduced media.
Thank you. Maria?
Thank you, Steve. And now we are ready for your questions.
Okay, well, I have a stack of cards. Would you like to hear them first?
Sure.
Okay, I believe this says Eric Reeve.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Reese, and I am coming to you for you as a member of the Friends of Transit organization, the past director of revenue for the Chicago Transit Authority, and as the most recent chairman for capital planning and economic development for the Government Finance Officers of America. I want to tell you that after looking through this plan, talking with Maria, talking through the rest of the staff, it is a well thought out, very smart and very prudent plan. One thing that you look at as you go throughout the nation, throughout the world, in looking at what makes a great city, and that is a strong public transportation network. Having that strong public transportation network provides economic development, and then provides a willingness for community expansion and for revitalization of other communities. So without saying anything more, I'd like to say this is a great plan. It's very well thought out, and it will provide you in the city great expansion over the years to come. And we wish you the best of luck on it.
Thank you very much. Walt Gray?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Subcommittee, I think you all got my email this morning with our preference after I talked it over with a few people on our steering committee on the west side. I would oppose, and I think we're still opposed, a permanent tax. I think that's inflexible. It's if you redo transportation to go to all the employment centers, and I try to get the map of all the employment centers that we have identified. And if you put that on this transportation map, you can see where patterns will change. They won't all come downtown. They all won't go through the center of the city. We'll have jobs closer to home. That can change how our patterns go in the future and what our infrastructure and transportation needs. This is all projected straight line out, and it's all projected downtown. We're just making the rich richer. They talk about, the Federal Transit Authority, the fares. It's still consumer. It's still consumer. There's nothing in here for developers or the business community or the multi-housing family, the Super Bowl proceeds, all those things. This story has yet to be in the Republic, yet to be on TV, anywhere in Phoenix. And we're going to have an up or down vote in August. That's all your choice is, an up or down vote in August. I think those are the main points that I think I have. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
David Roderick?
Thank you, members of the committee. Dave Roderick, Downtown Phoenix Partnership. Just want to say we are supportive of this plan. I think it's very well thought out. I think it's very important to remember that the ongoing infill development, which we have seen a tremendous amount in recent years in downtown and the central city, has been driven in a lot of ways by good transportation and the advent of the light rail system, the rapid system, and so on. And so it's very important as we continue to grow as a community to focus on the transportation infrastructure that is so important. So we would recommend that you ask the voters for their approval of this plan. Again, very well thought out, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Greg Tripkin?
Thank you, Madam Chair and council people. I served on the committee, and I wholeheartedly support what we've done. I'll tell you quite honestly, I started out this process a little bit of a skeptic on light rail. And I will tell you that as the process proceeded, I listened to public comment, I listened to the comment of the committee. I became, and I am convinced, that one of the things that we need to do and continue to do to be a great city and to put out the perception to the rest of the world that we are a great city is show the vision that we have shown with light rail to date, and that this will continue to show. So I strongly support this, and I hope you will too. Thank you.
Thank you. Abraham James?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and council members. As the chair of the Citizen Transit Commission and a member of the Citizen Committee on the Future of Phoenix Transportation, I want to express my support of the Comprehensive Transportation Plan and committee recommendations that have been presented to this subcommittee. On Thursday, February 5th, the Citizen Transit Commission unanimously supported the Comprehensive Transportation Plan and committee's recommendations. I hope this committee has taken the time to study, review, and question the plans and recommendations that have been presented. I hope that you will look upon this plan and these recommendations favorably. This transportation plan spans 30 years. Speaking to you as a citizen who used the bus, the light rail, and ride a bike, I remember coming to Phoenix in October of 1986, almost 29 years ago. What Phoenix was like back then and what Phoenix has evolved into today, there are very little comparisons. For one, I-10 and other freeway systems had been completed yet. I remember a downtown that wasn't vibrant and fun. There weren't very many bike lanes. I also remember a transit system that needed a lot of improvement for a major American city. Fortunately, the city of Phoenix had a visionary mayor, a visionary city council, city managers, city staff, and most of all, the citizens who were willing to strive forward to demand and support a better future for the city. From the day that I arrived to this day, our streets and mass transportation system is at a level of expansion and quality that has been unimaginable 20 years, that was unimaginable 20 years ago. Of course, this is not perfect. To maintain and expand upon this level of expansion and quality for the next 30 years will require a visionary mayor, city council members, city manager's office, transit departments, street departments, city staff, and most of all, citizens willing to strive forward and demand and support a greater future. I'm not able to predict the future, but I believe that the city of Phoenix will continue to grow. Phoenix will continue to be not only a national destination, but an international destination for business development, employment, recreation, education, and a home for future inhabitants. I predict in 30 years, Phoenix will host several more Super Bowls. I also predict that we'll have another World Series, an NBA championship, a national political convention, a Summer Olympic Games, Scottsdale, a Soccer World Cup. Should any one of these events occur, our city will be prepared for the transportation requirements of a 21st century city. Finally, I predict that our citizens will be excited and ready to support this transportation plan. I look forward to having Mayor Stanton and the city council members lead us toward the future by supporting this comprehensive transportation plan and the committee's recommendations. Thank you very much.
Shannon Dabalski?
Satari. Oh, oh,
No,
oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry.
she's really trying to change her name.
And this always happens. My name is Shannon Dubasic. I work in downtown Phoenix for the Capitol Mall Association. We're off the 7th Avenue and Van Buren. I live in the Coronado Historic District. And we want to support this plan, we really do, but we really feel strongly that there needs to be more modalities, such as a similar thing in Tucson, where they have a commuter, streetcar opportunity for our citizens. Also, speaking on behalf of the neighborhood, most of our families rely on bus. That's a current thing, and it will be a future thing. So we need to be able to have bus service for those families. They're not going to ride the light rail. They don't go to where the light rail is right now. So we really need to consider those things when we adapt this plan. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Muriel Smith?
My name is Muriel Smith. I'm with the Lindo Park Association, Homeowner Association. I'm very much in favor of this plan, but I'm also like Mr. Cossey. I think we need more bus service. I had put on when I did the survey, I had asked for more bus service to go down Southern Avenue, going east towards Levine area. We need more bus services there because I have a lot of people that are telling me that there is no particular bus service that go all the way out. And I'm particularly in the mood for more bus services go that way. But I am proud of the way you guys have conducted a survey. I had a lot of people that were in favor of it, and I'm also in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert Grant?
I think we have good news, so do you mind sharing? I agree with Muriel Smith, but I think we have good news in this proposal.
We do, and we could actually address Shannon's comments too. So in this plan, it includes a downtown circulation mode, and which could be in the high capacity. So that could be a streetcar, it could be a circulator of some sort or something more, but it is funded at a level that allows us to do and study and figure out what is the best way. Regarding bus service, this plan also includes quite a improvement in the bus. So with frequency, with hours of operation between light rail and the bus, it also increases the frequency on weekends, something that we get lots of complaints on. Anything else I need to add, Councilwoman?
That it does include additional service on Southern going.
It does.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you, Madam Chair, council members. My name is Robert Graham. I'm among the several hats that I wear. I'm sit on the Central City Village Planning Committee, although I'm not speaking for the committee. I'm also president of the Grand Avenue Rail Project, which is a private nonprofit group working on rail issues and specifically the streetcar issue that was just mentioned. But we were also very heavily participating, of course, in the whole planning project, and I'd like to say that I believe that the process was fantastic. I believe it was very fair and inclusive. We have a lot of things represented in the plan, and so I am definitely here speaking in support of the plan. And more specifically, looking at putting the planner hat on for a minute, I compare this plan to the recent and pending general plan update. And all the work that was put into that general plan update to establish what the goals were going to be for Phoenix for the upcoming years. Excuse me. And I find this transit plan to be very compatible with that, especially when you get down to there were a lot of time spent in that general planning process getting down to the core values. And just to, I'm sure are aware of these, but connecting people and places, strengthening the economy, sustainability, and creating a more vibrant brand town were four of the major components of the pending general plan that we hope to adopt. And I believe that this plan reinforces all of those different core values that we've identified. I'd also like to make sure that we are looking ahead. I was concerned that with a lot of the public input that we would be looking at and focusing mostly on just what do we need right now, because obviously those are very immediate needs that we need to address. But if there's anything that the last 10 to 15 years in Phoenix have shown us, is that what we thought was going to be our developing urban form is completely different, and partly shaped by the light rail system, partly shaped by ASU downtown, all the various things that have come forward. But interrupt my train of thought. So I would like to make sure that this plan does look forward. I think that it does. A 30-year horizon is a fantastic way to get started with that. So I thank you very much, and I'm in support.
Thank you. Michael Cornelius.
Hello. My name is Michael Cornelius. I'm a member of the Citizens Committee. Still looking to get that light rail to Metro Center. I was very honored when I was asked to sit on the committee by the mayor. It's a great experience. Public transit is important to the community. It's vital. I mean, it's vital to all aspects of the community. It promotes jobs. It promotes clean air. It promotes businesses. The problem that I have with, which is the reason why I voted against this, was part 4 of the motion. And I sort of heard it described today as innovative financing. And I'm certainly not going to accuse anybody of anything, but the problem is trying to mislead the public or trying to throw some cloud out there about what we're actually being asked to vote for. The problem in public transit is it's privatized. And I don't think that you as elected people should be putting the interests of corporations above the needs of the riders and the needs of the community. And with First Transit's contract, which Andy Federhar represents, over on this particular contract, over on the west side is $136 million. With the 4% profit with Veolia's $388 million city contract, and they're probably 4% profit, they're $20 million in profit of taxpayer dollars. So I think the what's missing in the motion is not to give the council the flexibility to go to more innovative financing solutions, but to get rid of these for-profit corporations who are profiteering off of the system. They cause labor strikes. We continue to have strikes over and over and over again. Why? Because mom and dad are fighting over the cake and us kids are fighting for the crumbs. To me, it's insane. It's absolutely insane to have a privatized public transit system where they're profiteering off of the system that should be a for-service system and not a for-profit system. And when you eliminate the need for profiteering out of the system, number one, the workers become public sector employees who don't have a current right to strike in the state of Arizona. You're about to ask citizens to vote on something. Well, okay, I'll give you my money, 100% of it, if you guarantee that 100% of it is going to go to the service and 0% is going to go to mostly foreign corporations who currently run the system. I'll vote for that. 100. Yeah, I got it. Everybody else went over. I'm going to go over. But you continue to give money to the corporations. If it's a publicly run body, 100% of the money goes to the service. The riders benefit because there's never going to be a strike again. 100% of their tax dollars go to the service. None of it to these for-profit corporations who are causing strikes every couple years. To me, it's ludicrous. You should always put the needs of the community above the needs of the corporations. Thank you.
Thank you. Roy Miller.
Thank you again for the opportunity to serve on the commission or committee. I'm not sure we decided yet which one it is. I'd like to make a couple of quick points. Last time, 2 of you expressed concerns about the revenue projections, and one of our committee members, Len Gilroy, addressed that, and I sent you all a submission that he made to our meeting, and I hope you will consider that because I do think he's right in that the revenue projections are too optimistic. Secondly, I believe there's still an insufficient amount of emphasis on non-transit related street improvements. That was why we appointed the subcommittee, as I mentioned last time. The elevation of their recommendations, and I was on that subcommittee, to the final report did not take place because we lost a quorum in the final meeting. So I believe that the report submitted by the committee vice chair and chair is not accurate in the sense that it doesn't have as much emphasis on non-transit related streets as the committee actually wanted. $30 billion tax increase, I think, is way too much. I think when we're in a city that is in need of 300 to 500 police officers, to spend $30 billion essentially to build trains is unwise. And I think also the emphasis on that tax increase was not properly related. Again, we never voted on anything in 11 meetings. In our final meeting, we never saw what we voted on, and I do not think the committee was in favor of that tax increase to the extent that the chair and vice chair presented it. Finally, the talk transportation process was too structured, did not allow for enough innovation in the responses, and I think that basically it was a wish list, which of course everybody wants more of everything, but somebody has to have the job of analyzing the cost benefit, and that did not occur. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna Renner? Okay. But she is in favor. Ernest Workman? is in favor? David Schwartz?
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. My name is David Schwartz, and I have the honor and the privilege to serve as the Executive Director for Friends of Transit. We're a nonprofit organization that educates the community about the benefits of mass transit as part of a balanced regional transportation plan. First thing I'd like to do is to say thank you. I want to thank Maria, Ray, Rick, and the hordes of staff who worked on this plan. To Marty, Maria, and all the members of the committee, because I didn't have a chance to go to every one of those meetings, but I went to many, and it was long, and it was very meticulous. They were very passionate and educated, and I think they made some really good decisions. I also want to thank each of you as members of the council. You all have demonstrated over the years you are very committed to public transportation and transportation in general. And I thank you for that, because that is probably one of the most important things you do. You know, you will hear a lot of people talk about costs associated with transportation. And I admire all of you. You've taken a very conservative, deliberate approach in how you've been looking at this. And I want to appeal to the conservative side. And rather than talk about the costs of transit, what I'd like to talk about is the value of transit. Now, there's two reasons. One, this week, Friends of Transit has its 13th annual conference, and our theme this year is the value of transit. So I have several Friends of Transit board members in the room. I would be remiss if I didn't put a plug in for the conference. But I also wanted to talk to you, as you all intuitively know. You've heard a lot about, you know, transit gives people a way to get around. It gives them their freedom, their mobility, their chance to compete. But I want to talk to you just real quick about the value of transit and a few notes or items of note. According to Valley Metro, 35% of our rail riders are choice riders. They choose that. There's 9,100, the average household could save $9,000 a year if they use public transit. But what I want to talk a little bit about is for every $100 million invested in transit equals 3,600 jobs. Think about how many jobs you can create by sending this to the voters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dave Greider? He left? Okay. Claude Maddox? Doesn't want to...
I wasn't going to, but I think I should.
Oh, this is a surprise.
Well, you know, I say this frequently. Everything that can be said has been said, but not by everybody. So I'm going to say something. Having gone through this process, having been part of the earlier process, this is not a committee that just sat down and started penciling out, this is what we want. It actually included the public's input extensively. And so it's a vision. It's a vision, a continued vision of what we have done in the past. We're looking at Phoenix 30 years from now and saying, this is going to be a great city 30 years from now. But the simple element to it is, we're just asking the voters to make a decision. If they don't like this, they're going to say no. I think they will like this. But all we're asking is just move it to the ballot. Let the public make this decision that they will support this and share the vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Will Bruder?
I'm Will Bruder. I'm an architect. I live on light rail. I work on light rail. I've been active in it since its inception back in the last century. And it's Good News Day because I never thought I would be standing here before you, congratulating you on your efforts to this point, but particularly standing here because I believe in streetcars. We have a light rail that's wonderful. It costs X per mile. Streetcars cost much, much less. And our city has matured to the point where we need those small connectors, those modal pieces. We need one downtown. We have a map in hand. We also need one at Midtown, because again, if we look at the map of the media, in the last year, how many articles have we read across the board about a city putting streetcars back online? In 1921, there were 14 streetcars in Phoenix, Arizona. They were not the origin of the public will. They were developers that made them happen. It was the start of the expansion of the city. Every city that has streetcars not only makes it more walkable, more pleasant, more attractive, but it also brings a livability and development, because with rails is the commitment of a developer to see it's not going to move with a new route change. So I'm encouraged and excited about that aspect of this as the whole thing. I will be there leading whatever I can from my constituency and community for this vote to pass when it comes forward later this year. Thank you all for all your efforts, and it's great to stand in a room like this. I never thought I'd be talking about streetcars in Phoenix this soon in a public forum like this. So thank you all very much.
And thank you. Alvin Livingstone?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, City Council members, members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Alvin Livingstone. I'm with the consultant community. I'm a transportation engineer. I work for a company called AECOM. My past experience, I worked for the City of Phoenix. I was in aviation. I also worked on light rail, so the stuff you see on Central Avenue, on Camelback Road, on 19th Avenue. I was partially responsible for actually managing the design for that, and also for the Northwest Extension right now. Transportation is big and actually it's actually close to my heart because probably about 5 years ago when the recession hit, I had to actually leave Arizona to go to California because they had the Measure R funding, for those of you who are familiar with that. And my family stayed here, but I went there just to earn a living. And a lot of the consulting communities, they took a hit, and some of them haven't quite recovered. This is what we do. We're in transportation. We're here, and we're another element. And I don't know if anyone actually spoke to that. And it's not just about transit. It's not just about rail per se. It's about buses. I grew up in New York City, and we took the buses everywhere, and trains. You had no choice. That's how you got around. It actually added to a quality of life, and you can pretty much go anywhere. I think Phoenix has that potential as well. I went to LA, and the same thing I saw with the Measure R. There was, places like Crenshaw that didn't really have light rail. They had buses and so on, but they didn't have rail. Now they have the opportunity to get rail. They're building a subway to the sea, so there's a lot of things that are happening there. I think that Phoenix has the potential. We just hosted a Super Bowl, for heaven's sakes, and we don't even have light rail out to the stadium. And that's another issue. That's not for this particular meeting. But the fact is that I think that support of this would probably be great when it does come out and hit the ballot. And I'm here, and so is the consultant community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert Branscombe?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Council people, Transportation consultants. My name is Robert Branscombe. I'm a small business owner here in downtown, but I also sit on the Levine Village Planning Commission. So I know how important it is to have good transportation, especially out in the area that we live in Levine, where we getting the expansion of the 202 freeway. I don't think anytime soon people are going to stop moving to Phoenix because of the weather back east. And as we expand, we're going to have to find some way to take care of that transportation need through the city. I lived in LA for 20 years, and I can tell you now how I can work 20 miles away but have to plan 2 hours ahead to get to where I needed to go. But also, we're having more events. We're trying to encourage more people to come to visit our city and to grow, and we'd like to have them have a way to get around the city. So I'm much in favor of this plan. But I also want the committee to understand, and several people have said up here before, about the economical impact that building this infrastructure will have by creating more jobs, and just to continue to look in your reports and give those to the people so they have a good, reasonable amount of information to look at and to vote on this proposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the cards I have. Is there anyone else in the audience that wanted to speak? All right, I see none. Council members, would you like to make comments, have questions?
I have questions.
All right.
I would like to know what projects in Transit 3000 have not been completed.
So I'm going to go back to the map because that's always a good one. So on the Transit 2000 map, it included the, I never know if this has a middle, this thing? Okay. All right, so in Transit 2000, it included the extension, the Northeast extension, and then it said that we would build another 7 to 10 light rail miles, and it noted where those areas could be. So you saw South Central was one of them. Northeast extension was in the map coming out here. And then we had the Glendale extension that we talk about. And so those were noted as areas in the Transit 2000, but it never said we had enough money, enough miles to do so. But it said these are the corridors where high-capacity transit makes sense.
I think it also went to MetroCen.
Correct. So I'm sorry, Northwest Extension, and I should have said that. Also not in what we've not been able to do in the Transit 2000 plan is on the bus side. So the Transit 2000 plan said that we should provide bus service at 15 minutes during peak. Only about 26% of our routes currently are at 15 minutes. And it also said that we should have, I'm trying to think of what else was on there.
Late night.
Late night, which was to midnight, and we average about 10 to 11, so we don't quite meet those hours. And we won't be able to build all of the transportation elements in there. So that was bus bays, left turn signals, and not all of the shaded bus stops. So not all of those elements have been able to be implemented yet in the 20-year program.
And just to add just a little bit, so we made very clear to the committee when they were going through their work and when they were sitting with all the puzzle pieces trying to put them together, they knew which pieces were included in the Transit 2000, and they made conscious decisions as a group whether or not to continue that commitment, or in some cases to alter that commitment. So as an example, on the percentage of buses that are running with a 15-minute frequency, I believe the original Transit 2000 said all the buses will run with a 15-minute frequency. Is that right? And I think the committee made a conscious decision to recommend that 60% of the routes operate with a 15-minute frequency. So they evaluated where we were and said, what have we achieved and what have we not achieved? But obviously the city has grown and changed in that time too. Priorities change, and in the case of the committee this time, they recommended some changes to that original plan as a result of evaluating the whole and everything that was out there now.
And in fact, here was the ballot.
So then what I'm hearing is there's been adjustments for the future, and not all those projects are all those projects part of this current plan, or not the Transit 2000, but in the future plan? The ones that were not.
So for the rail, everything that was on the map as potentially buildable, I'll say, because Maria described it, we didn't say we were going to build it all in that first 20 years. We said we can build X miles somewhere on this system, but there are pieces of the map of the proposed lines from the year 2000 that are altered a little bit. But everything that you see up here that is currently in the regional plan or about to be in the regional plan in the case of South Mountain is proposed to be funded for the for this future transportation plan. Did that answer? So from a project perspective, all of the currently planned light rail projects for Phoenix are on here, and then they added on a couple of things. They added the connection to ASU West, which really is a little bit of an alteration of what was on the ballot before, and they added the west of 43rd Avenue on Camelback. In other words, this shows just a vague sort of bubble, but you can see that bubble only goes to about 43rd Avenue, which is where Grand crosses, or to downtown Glendale at the most. So the committee also added an extension to the west beyond that would go clear to 83rd Avenue. That project was not on the Transit 2000 map. So those were and the last thing I'll mention, the downtown circulator that was mentioned is also a new addition. It was not included in the Transit 2000 plan, although obviously we have the Dash downtown today. But a substantial circulator system for downtown was not in the Transit 2000 plan.
More questions?
I do.
Keep going.
So what I'm hearing is not all those projects were funded by Transit 2000 that were projected. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell me why?
The primary reason is the revenue. We had 2 recessions during the 20-year period. And the projections that were created for the Transit 2000 tax did not provide for 2, one smaller and one very large recession in the plans. And part of it is just that, a lot of people stopped spending money in Phoenix. If they'd have continued to spend money and not lost the people, we would have been able to make those projections. So that would be the primary reason why we've not been able to meet all of the elements in the Transit 2000 plan.
Okay. And so what I understand, just getting clarity, so I know what that we projected in the future a possibility of something like that happening to us.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, we have. So we've done things, if you don't learn your lessons from the previous, then you really should, have some issues. But we have learned and calculated in that there are normal recessions that will happen over a 30-year period. Those are in here. But a couple of other things that we did that were not in the original plan was we've included a contingency factor on the construction costs, correct? A 4%. And we've also increased.
I guess I'll finish
Yes,
the
I'm
thought.
sorry. He knows this
Madam
better
Chair,
than I do.
Councilmember Pastor, we've built in a contingency reserve of about 33% of the operating program, as well as inflated costs about at the same rate as the estimated growth in the sales tax. So that if the growth in the sales tax doesn't occur, it's probably very likely that the growth in the costs won't be as much as we projected.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman?
One of the things that I'm very excited about in this is the customer service technology upgrades, including the most popular idea on talktransportation.org and the possibility of bringing Wi-Fi to more of our system. When I speak with students, I often hear from them that they would love to do their homework while they travel. And so we will be enabling their education to move forward. And I know we are all passionate about education here, so making that productive and maybe making it easier for some of our ASU students who are choosing other modes of transportation to switch to the light rail between campuses. So that is something I'm very excited about and something that hasn't come up a lot. So looking forward to moving forward on this. I think it's a very exciting opportunity. I think we answered my questions last time.
Councilman Gates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the presentation. And in the interest of full disclosure, David Schwartz gave us a great presentation with Friends of Transit. Just so everyone knows, my chief of staff, Laura Etter, used to do work for Friends of Transit. So just want to make sure everyone knew that for the record. Great presentation. I think you did a great job of addressing a lot of my questions. But of course, I have more. So one of the things that's interesting to me is, I think one of the great successes of light rail so far has been the connectivity of ASU between Tempe and the downtown campus. And one of the possible extensions is going to ASU West. I wonder if there's been any discussions or thoughts, if this plan were to be adopted, of partnerships, either with ASU, both on that line, and then also with Grand Canyon University. That's another one of the potential lines. Just kind of throw that out there for, wonder if that's been discussed or whether that's something that would be discussed down the road.
Yeah, Councilman Gates, let me address the ASU part. If you're in transit like I am, I just cringe when I see the beautiful plush bus that
Yes.
runs between downtown campus and ASU.
Oh, every
Tempe.
day.
But that's part of my job. I mean, I totally understand, but one of our discussions with ASU and with Valley Metro, so we've been talking with ASU now for almost a year in talking about really what their needs were and how we could maybe provide that resource for them rather than a bus. And so we're getting closer on that, but I can tell you that we see some opportunities, especially with connecting downtown to Tempe. And we know that our population, our downtown population of students is going to continue to grow. That might be something we could do as a near-term solution. And maybe that's even just as easy as adding in frequency on the light rail and having ASU potentially be like a buy-in of the service, just like we see with Glendale or Peoria buying service from our system. Again, these are preliminary discussions, but we are definitely in touch with them on this. We've also talked to them about, they've seen the copy of the plan, and they know that one of our ideas is to get out to ASU West. For the ASU West campus, they're going to see a 100% increase in student population within the next 25 years. And they're trying to figure out what is the best way. You cannot get all of your classes at any one of the campuses, and so this is Dr. Crow's one of the reasons why so many people transport from one campus to the other. But we would like to be their transportation system, and we will continue those discussions. And Grand Canyon University will be another one that we will have that discussion with this measure, Councilman. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. Just a couple things on this map here. First of all, just to clarify that the 2026 line there shows it ending on the east side of I-17. That should be over into Metro Center, right? I wanted to make sure for Madam Chair here that I clarified that. I know this is an older version of it, but just to be clear on that. And then also for the South Central line, the date on that is the same, is that right, as the Northeast extension? So that's, although I don't see a date on there, that's 2034?
2034 is what's expected.
Okay, perfect.
And Madam Chair and Councilman Gates, let me just clarify why the map shows what it shows. That extension to Metro is not yet approved in the MAG plan. And as Councilwoman Williams knows, because she sits on the Valley Metro Board, that just is going through the Valley Metro Board process, and then we'll go to, it's that same May time frame as South Central.
It will be approved at Valley Metro this week, though.
Perfect. I just want to make sure, one of our viewers there on Channel 11 didn't get confused by that map there. Okay. Couple of things that I guess I kind of want to get down into the numbers a little bit, and I appreciate I've got some more numbers drilled down here because we know here we have this sheet showing us what the 0.75 tax would bring, but we don't really have details on other levels of the tax. I appreciate this presentation went through where 0.4 would be. Again, that's just the same. Transit service would remain the same, and then adding 21 miles of the 36, but that's delayed 3 to 5 years. So that's 3 to 5 years delay from the dates that we see on this map.
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilman Gates.
Okay. And then also there's been, and I'll throw out a question if we don't know the answer to it, no problem, get back to me. But there are a couple of the rail lines, for example, the Paradise Valley extension. I think there are some other possibilities that would have us going to Paradise Valley Mall. That's a 13-mile line there, maybe an 8-mile line. So that's when I'd be interested in how this might change our cost estimates. I don't mean to speak for a district that's not represented here in this meeting, but the Camelback Phase 2, if that were to be removed, how that might change the cost estimates. So those are just two examples, and I don't know if we have those numbers now or at another time.
I could, Madam Chair and Councilman Gates, I apologize. I have a handwritten thing that I gave you here because you asked. Luckily, Councilman Gates doesn't just ask his questions at the meeting, so he did ask this question, and we tried to get a response, but the piece of paper we put together very hastily didn't have it quite right, and I want to make sure we got it right. So to answer your question, if you took out the West Camelback line cut it at 43rd Avenue, and then the rest of it was sort of dealt with either by Glendale or Regional or whatever, because it's likely to go north of there anyway, to get into Glendale for part of it. And you reduce the northeast extension, and those are the only changes you made to this plan, other than also taking that $16 million that Councilwoman Williams talked about. That would get you to about 0.72. So an increase of 0.32% in the sales tax.
Okay.
So, and you can see that on what I just handed you. No change to streets, no change to buses, no change to anything else, but just reducing those two routes in that way.
Madam Chair, Councilman Gates, too. We spoke with Glendale staff and about their plans, and although it's very preliminary, it appears that their goal is to move north on 43rd Avenue. So this modification didn't provide them with a lot of heartburn. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that it still has to go through all the approval stages, and it's still with Valley Metro, but they seem to be leaning more towards 43rd Avenue versus heading further west.
I'm sure most people are familiar with the map, but that Camelback is the divide between our city and Glendale. So they are a key partner on that. And perhaps if they are not ready to move forward on the financing on their side, then.
But last I knew, they weren't prepared at all. They're still in the discussion stages.
So this extension is currently with Valley Metro doing the analysis on it, and the corridor has not been finalized yet. But with the 2026 date, I know that there's some time to be able to get through both their council as well as our council with the final recommendation.
Has anyone spoken to Councilman Valenzuela regarding the?
Yes.
Madam Chair, Councilman Pastor, yes.
Okay.
We mentioned at our last meeting that this has some regional destinations on this particular extension, and that it may be a regional opportunity to move forward.
I might also mention, and the committee members can tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong, that the committee also struggled with that particular line. They didn't discuss the shortening of the Paradise Valley line like you talked about, Councilman, but they did really struggle with whether or not to put that phase 2 extension in there for the exact reason you all identified. We did get a lot of positive public input about the possibility of, and somebody said it here today, of getting the rail to go to the stadium eventually, the University of Phoenix Stadium in Glendale. So, that certainly is something the public gave us a lot of input on. And I don't know if you want to add what I said or.
In 2 words, he's correct.
Okay.
Right.
Other questions?
Madam Chair, yes. And so we have other, again, so that's 0.72, so we heard what that is. At 0.6, and you can tell me if this changes with Northeast Extension, but with a 0.6 tax rate, you'd have the same transit service. You'd have all 36 miles in the plan, but delayed 3 years. You would have the street improvements in 0.75 or 2.4 billion. That would be scaled down to 1.9 billion, and 25% of the committee planned bus service improvements. But I think that excludes the new circulators.
Yes. So you're talking about 0.6?
Yeah.
So 0.6 is a substantial reduction in the improvements that are recommended by the committee for bus, and somewhat of a reduction for streets as well. in addition to those rail cuts that you talked about. And then you also mentioned the rest of the rail miles would be delayed by about 3 years.
Yeah.
We got to point 6.
But if you, and I'm asking you to do this on the fly, but if you were to take 5 miles out of the Paradise Valley extension and remove Camelback Phase 2, that could be, let's see, I don't know if anybody trying to do some quick math, always a bad idea. That's about, well, the sales tax share on Camelback Phase 2 is $242 million, and I think that's about another $200 million for Paradise Valley. So that's over $400 million that could go to bus, for example. Is that accurate?
I'm going to, Ken, at that point 6, about what would the bus reduction be?
Sure. So in the model at point 6, when you reduce northeast extension down to, say, approximately 8 miles or whatever, as well as the elimination of the Camelback Phase 2, you get about 25% of the plan of the committee's recommended bus improvements, and then you also get a lower level of streets as well as kind of delayed streets improvements as well, because to build those rail projects, you need the cash more in the front end of the plan, and so that would defer some of the cash available for streets till later in the plan.
Okay, so if you remove rail projects, that would free up some for the
Correct.
streets. Okay. I think for people who haven't had the opportunity to go through this like the commission did, there's a lot here. There's a lot of wonderful additions in the transit area, in the light rail area, in the streets area. Thank you, Mr. Federher, for chairing the streets subcommittee. I think that's something that I know in my district we're hearing a lot of desire for that. That's something we hear about, if not on a daily basis, almost a daily basis. So that I think that's an important part of this moving forward, and that be available to folks. I am very again, I want to thank staff. I want to thank everybody who's spent the last week digging into this, helping, frankly, debunk statements that this is a $30 billion tax increase. It's not. I think it's important that we get full information out there so that we can all, understand that and understand what we're being asked to vote on. Because in the end, we are being asked to vote on something. I mean, to say, well, you just put it on the ballot, I don't think that's fair to my colleagues, because if we don't vote on something, it's not going to the ballot. So we play a part in this, and I know every single one of my colleagues do take it very seriously. And so as I look at all the different pieces here, and it is, I think you even did a puzzle exercise, there's a lot of different ways you could put the puzzle together, and I have great respect for where you all came out on this, but I think there are a lot of different ways that someone could come out on this. And also, we do need to consider that this is one piece of a bigger puzzle for the city of Phoenix, which is beyond transit. And there's been some discussion today about the fact that we're 500 officers down, and there's discussion every time I go to a meeting about how our parks are not where folks want them to be, and on and on and on. So, and the fact that we haven't had a bond election since 2006, and I haven't heard about any bond election coming anytime soon. So I guess where I would come out on this is, at this point anyway, is I would love for the people of the city of Phoenix to have an ability to look at these options in more detail. So I will throw it out here at this time and see if there are any seconds that we would have an item to go forward to the full council that would have 3 options for the voters, where they could vote on a .4, and again, this is the beginning of the process, a .4, a .6, and based upon what I just heard, a .72. So they would have the opportunity to weigh those, and obviously, we'd need to have legal look at this and, where that all comes out. But I think that in that type of an instance, that one that got the most votes would then prevail. But I would throw that out.
Okay, I don't hear anyone seconding it, so I appreciate your comments, and I understand. I do have a question. I think it's my turn.
I'll second.
Oh, okay, never mind. We'll go back to
And then
the
we can vote
motion.
on it. I mean, we
I
can vote on
believe
it.
referring multiple ballot initiatives will confuse the voter and lead them to be more likely to reject all three. So I guess is that what you're proposing, that we have three things on the ballot on transit?
Yeah, I'm not proposing that we confuse the voters. I'm proposing that they have options. Yes, I am.
And I agree with you. I think it creates confusion, and I think, truthfully, I think the people of the city depend on us to take public input and come up with our best recommendation and put that forward to them. So I just feel strongly one item on the ballot should be what it
Are
is.
we going to take a vote?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails. I have a question. Based on our current dilemma and our declining, I can't say declining because we actually are taking in more money. However, online sales and other things are killing us slowly. It's like a drop of blood at a time. Was that taken into consideration, our growth patterns as a city, when you formulated the amount for this tax?
Madam Chair, that's correct. We average in just the average growth rate that takes into account the city's projected growth, but conservatively not. There were periods in the city where it grew a lot, where our revenue growth was like between 6% and 7%. And so the projections that we used were much more conservative than actual historical growth.
How conservative?
That's where the 4.75% average growth.
I think you're still being optimistic, and I'm very concerned about that. I hope you're right, and I hope that other gentlemen's predictions all come true. But I'm a big believer in transit, and as Councilman Gates said, the calls we get on the streets every day, as well as trying to drive across some of them, it's more than a bumpy ride. It's becoming hazardous in some of our major arterial streets. There are potholes and missing slabs of concrete. Andy?
Madam Chair, 30 years ago, we were debating whether to pass a half-cent sales tax to pay for highways in Maricopa County, because the highways you see up there, the 101, most of the 51, the 202, 303, they didn't exist. And in November of 1985, 30 years ago, that sales tax passed. I had the privilege of serving as the chairman of the State Transportation Board for a number of years, laying out the alignments for all those roadways that now are open, and as several of the speakers commented, did change the economic growth patterns of the valley, and I think for the better. The problem that we face with this is just exactly what Councilwoman Pastor was talking about, what I think Councilman Gates and others have talked about, is we're looking at an unclear crystal ball in terms of what's going to happen. The reason why the committee came up with the flexibility that it did in some of its provisions in terms of a permanent tax, in terms of an ability to come back and revisit, was to deal just with that foggy crystal ball. And so to the extent that things become clear over time, for example, with the original half cent, it became clear that it was insufficient to pay for the entire freeway system, and so changes had to be made. I know you all miss the Paradise Parkway that was supposed to go east-west across the heart of Tucson, Phoenix. No, you don't miss it at all. But those changes were made to accommodate what happened in reality. And so the committee's recommendation to you was to maintain some of those mechanisms to accommodate those changes. If the state decides that it wants to come with more money for freeways and roads, that would give you some flexibility. If there are new innovative funding sources become available, it would give you flexibility to deal with things without affecting the rate of coverage that you must provide to bonds. When you sell bonds, you make a contract to maintain a certain amount of coverage on those bonds, excess revenue. And as long as you don't break that covenant, you are free to adjust how you want to deal with the financing of your bonds, as long as you maintain the amount of coverage you've promised to. So on behalf of our street subcommittee, we looked at those things and came up with the recommendations we did to give you that flexibility and to give the voters some assuredness that what they're promised is what they're going to get. And as we put these limits there, we make that more cloudy. And I don't think that does us well in the long run.
No, and I thank you for their comments, and I agree with you, and I applaud your efforts to do that. I just am trying to get assurance that everything was taken into consideration. You know, I think it's interesting. Everyone I've talked to out in the community, whether it was friends or neighbors, whomever, I happened to work this into the conversation that this was coming. And not one of them do they even paid anything today. They had no idea any percent of the sales tax went to them. And when I said, well, would you mind if you bought a $10,000 car, spending an extra $35 so you had light rail everywhere around the city and you had buses you could jump on and you could drive on your streets? And they said, H, no, not a problem. So I, as a elected official, cringe every time you say, oh, we got to raise the rate or raise the tax. But to me, it depends on the value you get for it. And this is something that I see as a value, a great value for the city of Phoenix, but it has value for the entire valley. And when we talk about economic development, and we just had the head of our new department head of economic development talk to us on how they strategized and how they were going to plan, and the key component of it was coordinating so that we had the resources that we could build the infrastructure on identified sites that we could attract some of these large Intels and some of these other, and we don't have that. We do not have that in Phoenix, and I see this as a key instrument to get us there.
Madam Chair, couldn't agree with you more, and while it's dangerous to talk for the majority of the committee, I'm going to do it anyhow because I think the sentiment is clear. And I want to go back just a few decades when I was working for a nuclear utility company. You know, we used not only computer models and analysis, but we also used models in order to build, and we still do to operate, the Palo Verde Nuclear Power Plant. We actually used, with regard to this commission, models to visualize what the choices were, as well as, you know, behind these numbers are computer analysis and estimates. And I'm not mincing words. When we talk about fee increases or tax increases, I know that there's a group of people, including even myself on occasion, will say, oh my gosh, it's an increase. However, when we say it's an investment, from a business standpoint, we say, what's the return on investment? Well, I think it is palpable now in the city of Phoenix, and it is palpable and clear in those cities where they have a rail line, which would be Tempe, now Mesa, moving out east, that the actual return on investment has been calculated, and it is about $7 billion. At the last subcommittee meeting, you had one developer who was an apartment or multifamily developer come forward, and I said, boy, if you want me to name names, I'd be glad to, of others who have come to me because of work that I do in the community and tell me how important this is and how the patterns in Phoenix, let alone the patterns in the greater metropolitan area, are changing because the demographics are changing. So I understand that you have to look at the data, including the actual physical tax increase. However, the committee also looked at physical tax decreases and came to the conclusion that we were going to recommend to you an investment. So the words we're using are investment, and the words that we are using rolled up to it's not even a penny. It's 0.75% of 1 cent, or 3/4 of a cent in total. And as you said, there are already people in the city of Phoenix even though others are benefiting, are paying 0.40 tenths, which is 4/10 of a penny. So, and if you go with the 30-year recommendation, even though my colleague over here, Mr. Federhar, said it very well, there was a reason for the other logic. But if you look at it as investment and you look at the total amount, we get the package because we did not, I think as a committee, really want to leave things on the table that were not going to be part of the connectivity of the valley, first of all, and demonstrate that there was a strong investment in streets as well as in the transit program. And finally, the way this is structured, and no other professional than Mary Peters would say it so well as she did last time, this is predicated on the fact that if the voters agree to a proposal that you put forward, that it's designed to get dirt flying. In other words, construction generating, because these processes do take a long time. But the face of the city is changing very fast. I've lived here since 1953. It's now more rapid than ever before, and that's why we're here recommending, as we did, the 0.75 or 0.3 of a cent.
Thank you. And I just finished my comment. I think someone going to make a motion here. I'm very supportive of 30-year. I think that that's important, that people need to know that there is a limitation, that there's a goal to meet, and give the next generation opportunity to go beyond those years. I am also thinking we could, the 43rd alignment, stop at 43rd Avenue, or the Camelback, I stop at 43rd, as well as you mentioned something going to the northeast, I believe.
Yes, 5 miles.
And I'm willing to eliminate
May I
those.
attempt a motion?
You may.
I move that we accept recommendations 1 through 3 of the Citizens Committee on the Future of Transportation with the following modifications, where Councilman Gates has saved us hundreds of millions of dollars. That we exclude Camelback Phase 2 from moving forward, and that we attempt to reduce by 1/3 the route to Paradise Valley Mall, and that we commence the tax on January 1st of 2016 and sunset it on December 31st of 2050. So it would be a 34-year period, and that we direct staff to work with the Citizens Oversight Committee to propose a plan that supports the additional streets capital needs identified but not funded by the proposed sales tax.
And how about to research if it could be turned into an enterprise fund and look at those options?
And to research if public transit could become an enterprise fund, and that the 16 million identified earlier in staff's presentation be spent on public safety.
Would it become an enterprise fund, or would it become the special revenue fund? I'm still.
I think in
Okay.
order
All right.
to, well, I think in order to
Semantics.
preserve the future flexibility of the council to infuse general funds, should you want to do that, you wouldn't call it an enterprise
Thank you.
fund. You would continue to have it be a special revenue fund. But it's clear, I think your direction is, the current, if this tax is adopted, the current 16 million that goes in to bus and rail from the general fund would be shifted to fund, I think, additional police officers is what, I don't know if that was your intent.
Yes, so special, thank you, Councilwoman Pastor. So a special revenue fund to preserve the.
And since our expert is here, I just want to make sure, does that work, Mario? Okay. All right.
It'd be a little bit.
But flood control and some streets projects might still have general fund.
That's correct.
May I add something to that motion? I would like to see how you fit it in within the boundaries, but I would like to see circulators. Is that?
So my motion
reading
maintained the
this.
circulators recommended
Okay.
by the Citizens Committee
Okay,
on the
that's
Future
what
of Transportation.
I want to make sure.
So the motion that Councilwoman Gallego made keeps all of the
Okay, that's
bus,
what I wanted to make sure.
circulator, bus rapid transit, hours, everything with the bus and streets that was in the plan. The only curtailment of the plan that the committee put forward is the west of 43rd, Camelback line, and shortening of the Paradise Valley Mall line, northeast extension line.
I just want to make sure, because we're.
And I don't know the exact amount that would be. I would imagine you would bring it back. It would be somewhere between the 72 and 75.
That's correct. We are estimating right now it would be approximately 0.72, but it would
Okay.
be helpful not to nail a number down right now, just because I think Ken needs to make sure the numbers work.
Will you second it?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Further discussion? Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this has been a great process, obviously, throughout. Wonderful. All the time that was spent by the commission. This subcommittee, I think, really delving into this, and I anticipate we'll have another good discussion at the full council level. You know, somebody earlier here talked about up or down vote, and that's what this is set up to be, is an up or down vote, which, I mean, honestly, the two of you, Marty and Andy, Mr. Federhard, Mr. Schultz, could not have done a better job of articulating the case for this. I really mean that. However, you know, having said that, we're talking about nearly a doubling of the tax rate. This gets it a little bit better. It's a little bit close. It's a little bit farther away from doubling the tax rate, but that's where it is. So at this point, you know, I will be voting against this motion today. But I think we're well on our way, and it's a, you know, it's really been a great discussion and debate, and I want to thank staff for all their hard work on this.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call for the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The motion carries. I want to thank all of you. I know you will probably be back to the full council hearing for a repeat performance, but I appreciate not only everyone who served on the committee, but everyone who took the time to come down and testify on this, because it is our future of our city in this valley, and we really appreciate your input. Thank you. We will go to item 3, which is the capital improvement program, transit. Maria, you just get to go.
Madam Chair and subcommittee members, we figured these two items fit very well with what you just talked about. Remember, this is a very high level, very quick overview of both the transit program, and then we'll come back with the streets program, just like we did for water and public works. And they're just for information, but if you have particular questions or issues you'd like us to follow up on, we're happy to do so.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we're going to start off with the Public Transit Department, sort of a preview of our CIP submittal for this year and the coming 5 years for the CIP program. So first, just want to kind of talk briefly about our program scope, which is really based on new construction and acquisition of fleet, as well as renovation of existing facilities. This is important basically to maintain our system in a state of good repair, extend the useful life of assets we currently have in the system, as well as accommodate for some growth here in the future. And this kind of goes in line with the previous agenda item, you know, on the longer, bigger plan. This obviously here for this 5-year program is a much smaller scope than what we've been dealing with here over the last couple of subcommittee meetings.
Can I just mention, though, that especially for the public who is watching this, any plan that we put together, whether it's the future plan, the future comprehensive program, we go through these 5-year rolling estimates every year before you all, and run through them and making sure that we're still on track, we're still meeting what the community wants, and can make any adjustments with that. So we're actually kind of excited. This may be a little dry, but we think it's very exciting, so you can talk about what we're doing over the next 5 years in transit.
Thanks, Maria. So moving on to looking at like sort of the program objectives and meeting the community needs. Obviously, economic development is a huge issue, as some of the folks who spoke on the previous agenda item mentioned. And what we're doing with our CIP program is in line with that, to support the transit system, enhance it, to enhance that regional mobility, not just for Phoenix, but as well as our connecting neighboring communities. And it's also an important objective as far as maintaining existing facilities. we have folks that operate out of our facilities and mitigating any safety risks and those types of things. So some of the renovation projects we have in our CIP are very critical for that. Now, just talking about community involvement activities, although we don't really have specific community involvement on our 5-year CIP directly, we do hold public meetings for service changes, and as well as the Citizens Transit Commission looks at all of our capital procurements, as well as all our procurements, looks at our service changes and our annual budget each year. And in terms of specific public involvement for our capital projects, most of our major capital projects are in the part of the MAG Transportation Improvement Program because they receive federal dollars. And so going through the MAG process, there is public input on that, and as they revisit the regional transportation plan and look at the priorities, so there is that public involvement at those stages of the process. So in building our 5-year CIP each year, as Maria mentioned, we go through this annually, and we're actually 3 or 4 times a year looking at our forecasting to see where we stand in terms of the dollars we have, as well as the ongoing needs that we have. Obviously, funding is a very big strategic issue for us, as we just spent a couple hours talking about for the longer plan, as well as last week and all the time the committee has spent. So obviously, with the upcoming expiration of the Transit 2000 tax, the Committee on the Future of Phoenix Transportation, their recommendation, obviously looking at addressing that. Also, we look at federal funds and utilizing the maximum amount of federal funds we can get into our program. And we're constantly working with MAG and other partners here in the region to bring more federal dollars to the region for our projects and build that into our capital program. And obviously a big strategic issue is the aging infrastructure. We have a couple of our O&M facilities, those operating garages that are over 30 years old. We just completed the renovation of the North Transit facility last year, and Jesus will be going over an upcoming project for the South facility that we have on the horizon. And then obviously looking at development and growth in the city is a big strategic issue as we develop our CIP, looking at where we're growing and what are the capital needs to meet that demand. And so looking at some projects specifically that work with the private sector, the Levine area park and ride right now, looking at that being part of the Loop 202 South Mountain project with the private sector involved, as well as the planned redevelopment for the Central Station property involving the private sector. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jesus Sapien, who'll kind of get into more details about specific projects in our CIP.
Thank you, Ken. And thank you again for this opportunity to give an overview of what we're doing over the next 5 years. As Maria said, for us, this is very exciting. One of the things that we're doing out at Desert Sky, currently we rent a small area there. And what we have done is we have acquired some land, and I just drove by there Saturday, and it's all fenced off now, so you'll be very excited to know we are building a very nice transit center out there. A lot of people don't know that Desert Sky Mall is the most heavily utilized transfer point in the region, not just Phoenix, but in the entire region. So we get a lot of ridership out there. So one thing we're doing out there is that we're building a new park and ride. It's going to have ticket vending machines. It's going to have a lot of the amenities that you see at a regular transit center that we don't have today. So that's going to be a huge improvement for a lot of those crosstown routes and those passengers that make those connections from other cities. Another thing that you'll be seeing us doing in the coming weeks is we'll be talking to you about our bus stop shade study. We've actually gone out and done an extensive inventory of our non-shaded bus stops, and we'll be coming to you with those results in a few weeks so that you can see how we allocate funding and shade and things like that according to the ridership that we see along our heavily traveled routes and intersection points. As Ken mentioned earlier, the South Transit facility, this is a facility that's over 30 years, and it's one of 2 facilities that's used to operate 70% of Phoenix's service. So we need to make some upgrades up there. One of the things that the council approved last year that we continue to work on, and this is actually the last of 3 facilities that we need to make improvements to our fueling infrastructure. Currently we use LNG, liquefied natural gas. We are converting to compressed natural gas, which is has a lot of benefits for the city, and it's just more in line with what we are seeing the transit industry do as a whole, from operations to engine manufacturing and maintenance practices. And the last big thing is vehicle replacements. City Council approved last year for us to work very closely with RPTA on a regional bus procurement. So what we're doing is that we are leveraging a good amount of FTA funds that we get, And we are going through and evaluating our fleet and replacing anything that has met or exceeded its useful life. So that's very exciting for us because, again, that's changing out everything that was LNG to CNG. And so that's basically what the industry that we see is doing. In terms of ongoing construction, Light Rail Northwest, again, we drove that on Friday to see how it's going. And any of you that have been in that area, you know that it is moving forward very well. Still a lot of detours and lights, that temporary light that we have in several sections, but it's moving forward and we're getting closer and closer every day. And so that's a big project for us. With the south facility refurbishment, we'll be starting that shortly, and we hope to be done with that at the end of next year. Another big deal for us is the East Baseline Park and Ride. 24th Street and Baseline, currently under construction, will be done by April for that. So we'll have some new rapid service for Southeast Phoenix starting in April with those service changes. Another thing we're doing, we received some funding to do some engine rebuilds, so we're extending the life of some of our vehicles, and that just saves us money. And the other thing we're doing are building improvements to our building. As you know, we are in a separate building, but under which we have some tenants. And we're doing things like improving the lobby and elevator, so we have that built into our 5-year plan. Again, some of the things that we're doing, lighting, we're changing a lot of our lighting, not only at bus stops, but parking rides as well. We're going to LED when that's going very well. Those are more bright, save us money, and last longer, and require less changeouts. So that's part of our CIP. And again, the big things that we have going on for next year is the construction of the park and ride and vehicle replacements. The numbers are up there, so I won't read them line by line, but there's a considerable amount of our fleet that we're changing out, again, because it's met the end of its useful life and we want to make some improvements to that. And as was discussed during the last agenda item, we want to make some communication systems improvements. There's a lot of things that our passengers are asking for, like Wi-Fi and connectivity, and that's going to take some infrastructure on our buses to make that happen. So that's something that we are working on in the coming years. We've had a regional study, again, working with our PTA to see what we have now and what we need in the future, and so that's part of our long-term planning. And these are just some pictures of some of the things we do every day, including some of the Northwest Extension picture is a little old, but that goes to show you some of the work that's already been done out there. And if you drive it, all you have to do is go from Dunlap to Montebello and see how much progress has been made in that area. And with it, I'll turn it over to Kent for the even more exciting figures in the financial.
Talking more financial. So this is just about a 10-year look at our CIP budget, and you can see back in '06 a very large budget there and shrinking over the years, and that's basically due to the current light rail project that was built, and you see it kind of ramping down there. The light rail opened in the middle of fiscal year '09. We had some other major projects kind of going on in fiscal year 10 related to the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funding we received from the federal government. And then we kind of went down a little bit, and kind of where we're at today, looking at next year in fiscal year 16, is it's going to be primarily more of a capital maintenance and fleet replacement program until whatever may be adopted by the voters for the new program. So in the current horizon, our 5-year CIP is a fairly low number compared to where we've been at in the past. And it's and moving on, just basically show you this is the breakdown of the funding for the fiscal year 16 proposed CIP for public transit. As you can see there, predominantly our federal FTA grant funds, as well as a fairly large portion coming from the Regional Transportation Fund as well, and a smaller portion coming from our local T2000 funds. And with that, I'd be happy to, or we'd be happy to answer any questions.
We do have one card, Walt Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Subcommittee. I don't have any specific comments about these, the CIP, but I just wanted to point out, I'm glad to see in the CIP there's a development demand section so that you can make changes, and the changes are naturally made when there's changes in development and changes, and the development reflects new patterns of travel. I think we'll see that with the Economic Development Plan. And the Economic Development Plan I think should be encouraged to the highest degree, even adding staff to the community economic development staff, because we're in a national recovery now, and this is the time to go after these businesses and have a new relationship with Mexico, and we can and we're looking for blue collar jobs in a lot of these economic employment centers. This is not necessarily competing with downtown. Downtown is white collar. But it'll change the traffic patterns. On the west side and the east side, it's going to mean north and south travel, more north and south travel into the employment centers than east and west travel. And I also encourage you to watch what happens in South Phoenix there, because, you know, the whole business of throwing a light rail line to go serve the people on Baseline Road, you know, we got to worry about the people in South Phoenix. And that means job training and economic development in South Phoenix. And where those people don't, you know, just like we see on the freeways now and light rail now, they go right by all these working poor and poor areas. And yet the working poor and poor areas have the shortest commute. And then right now they're using the longest commute for entry-level jobs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have item 4, which is the street transportation 5-year capital. If you could go through it as quickly as possible so I don't lose a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. Some of the history, just to kind of be brief on the history. In the past, the Street Transportation Department, when they've come to you all as a overall city council and mayor, we've kind of focused more our overall capital improvement program to the major streets and major drainage. And things that have happened with the Great Recession and just the funding levels that we're looking at, and also some of the things that are happening with regards to just the needs and desires of the community are changing. So one of the things that we're going to talk today with you all is basically looking at a different look at how we look at our capital improvement program, and focusing on these 5 major components that make up overall the department's funding for the projects that we look at, both balancing capital needs as well as operations and maintenance needs. And also looking at how do we tie this to economic development. As been discussed in previous capital improvement program presentations, economic development is a major component that we need to be tying to that area. And looking at more of an overall scope of how we deal with transportation, and as you saw with the last presentations, and how do we connect with the next generation of transportation needs. Also, one of the aspects that we looked at originally was that we calculated about $7.1 billion worth of needs overall for the next 30 years. With that, we do have the needs for the stormwater drainage issues. So moving forward with some of the this presentation, this just shows you sort of an overall historical aspect on how we've adopted some of the CIP budgets. Predominantly, this is incorporating all of the different pots of funding that we have, both operations and maintenance and capital aspects. This is going into our proposed program for the next 5 years. It's an overall $417 million for a 5-year program. As you can see, it's a variety of different funding sources that we have. The majority of it is our Arizona highway user revenues, as well as other components with federal funds. One of the big components on federal funds is that we do have a major component there with regards to the regional transportation plan that we're moving forward with some of the projects up north and in the south area. So kind of going into the major topics or major components, major maintenance is one of the major areas that we're focusing our aspects with regards to moving forward. And here are just an overview of some of the elements that we're looking at. Pavement overlays, as we've talked before with you all, pavement overlays include crack seal, slurry seal, micro seals, A lot of the requirements for street sweeping that we have for federal compliance, as well as getting federal funds to buying more equipment for street sweeping, wash maintenance, a lot of aspects related to the maintenance scope of our department. This just shows sort of an overall number for the 5-year program, close to $160 million for the maintenance aspect. The next one is the major transportations, and I'll just kind of show you some of the projects that we have here. Just an overview of some of the projects we've been working on up to this point, and some of the things that we're working towards with regards to other projects in the region. For example, Chandler Boulevard extension, that's a project that we're working with the ADOT and their efforts with the South Mountain Freeway. Other projects, the Avenida Rio Salado, there's a phase 1 and a phase 2. We're incorporating those because of the regional transportation plan that we have working with Maricopa Association of Governments. This just shows you the overall pot of money that we have for the major transportation, close to $200 million. And then the other focus is looking at mobility. How are we moving the other modes of transportation that we have to consider with pedestrian and bicycle mobility? And here are just a snapshot of some of the projects. And mind you, these are not all the projects. We have a variety of more projects, but for brevity of what we're just showing you some of the highlights of some of these projects that we're working on. And that just shows the pot of money that we have for that program. Another component that we talked about that as our aging infrastructure continues to age, not only with our pavement, we have technology improvements that we need to be looking at with our traffic signals, our signal prioritizations that we have for all the corridors. So we need to make sure that we're looking at the cutting edge and how we can better manage those systems. So here's an array of different programs and projects that we're working on. One to highlight, we're working towards the LED street light conversion. That is a major project for us to convert more than 90,000 lights across the city. In addition, we're working with Parks Department and Public Works, as well as other potential cities and state agencies to look at how can we leverage more of their infrastructure to have a better economies of scale when we go out and do that RFP, that request for proposals. And that's coming out pretty soon. Here's the amount of funding that we're using for that for the next 5 years. And then the last item is stormwater projects. As we've talked in the past, we do have challenges with that. This just shows some of the projects that we're looking at for moving forward. Again, there's a lot of local drainage aspects, floodplain management, levee maintenance, dam maintenance, as well as some of the projects that we're working with Flood Control District to move ahead and try to see how we can work with them to leverage their funding as they get funding for flood control systems.
And let me just interject one thing here, Madam Chair. Councilwoman Gallego knows the stormwater Levine issues very well, and you'll notice on this slide, 27th Avenue Basin at South Mountain is shown in the 15-16 year, and we're prepared to bring our local match to that year. But as you know, there are some discussions about leaving it in the FY 16-17 year and doing some other smaller local improvements first, because by itself this project doesn't completely rescue the Levine, and there may be some opportunities to partner up with the timing of the South Mountain Freeway construction where this project could be delivered in a cheaper way if we wait a little while to do it. So I didn't want you to think we for sure know the answer there yet. We're still working with flood control on that.
Thank you, Rick. Just moving ahead, here's our funding. And just in the past, previously, a lot of the funding that we've used for stormwater has come through the bond programs. And as you mentioned, Councilman Gates, we haven't had the bonds. And so moving ahead, this is what we're looking at and trying to see how we can work with Flood Control District and other aspects of our budgets that we have. And then lastly, this is how do we look towards the future and what are the challenges that we're having? As you all know, the Arizona Highway User Revenues, those are declining because of better fuel economy cars and federal requirements that are being imposed across the whole nation. But also there's continued sweeps out of the state that are hampering that funding. Capital construction funding is another very versatile funding that we have that we get through the telecommunications funding or telecommunications agreements that we have with a lot of the cable providers. That funding is also declining because of more different types of services that they're providing out there. And then the continuation of the street and storm sewer bonds, sort of how do we see the future and with some of the challenges that we have with the needs. And then working towards the next transportation initiative, how do we balance that, balance our current programs that we have for revenues, and balance what we can potentially get out of the next transportation initiative. And just to point out, there was a reauthorization of the federal transportation, that the MAP 21 that expired last year, but it did get continued through May of this year, and so we're always looking at how that is affecting not only the region, but how we're dealing with our projects. So that's the end of our presentation.
Okay, any questions? Well, we thank you very much for the presentation, bringing us up to date.
Thank you.
Takes us to the next item, which I believe is public comment. William Nye. I think he's gone. And Walt Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and subcommittee. I had not heard, I guess it's just a recent development here about this fund for transit, or using the general fund money, transit money for police. Again, as I have done in the past, I caution you about throwing all that money into the police department. First, the police department is not functioning as efficiently as it could be. Secondly, while we need some police officers, there's more to crime than just keeping people safe. You can have an increase in crime and still keep people safe. What we want to do is reduce crime, throw the kitchen sink at it, cut it back through prevention and interaction. And the way we do that is by using multiple approaches. And that includes the community centers and the libraries, but it also includes the PAC programs. It includes all these things that are necessary for kids and for young people. Crime is committed between 15 and 28. The brain stops developing at 25. So a lot of the people are making mistakes, and they're undereducated for the large part. If you look at the prison system, it's an undereducated group. So these people are not necessarily bad, as the police department says. You're either good or bad. If you're bad, you get arrested. That's fine. They can be arrested, but we don't write these people off for the rest of their lives. And we have social ills because of poverty. Crime comes with poverty. There's a direct relationship. So we don't all just need police officers. We need things that are reducing crime. The economic development plan is a very important part of that. But we also need the social ills, the domestic violence, teen pregnancy, and those things. I know it's been a long day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any suggestions or items you want on future agendas? No? We've had enough for today. We're
Plenty
saturated.
coming up, right?
Okay, then we're adjourned.